How about now? Can you all hear us? Okay. Yeah. I think when he switched it around, it kind of.
Yeah, they're saying not very good. Yeah. Okay.
All right, so back up a minute. For those online that couldn't hear us previously, we just had asked that questions or comments be held for the question and comments, which is the last item on the agenda because we don't necessarily see that you have your hand raised while we're making the presentation. So we'll do that when you ask your question that can be then broadcast to the room as well. This is the final public presentation again, for those who are online. The idea here was if there's something that we've missed, something that you want to have covered, we're expecting to hear that and accommodate that need, and then issue the final report following this meeting. But this presentation is what we called the final review. And it's the final public outreach meeting. There may be some public board meetings and that going on in the future as this moves along. So we're basically at the end of that four-step process that I showed at the last two meetings. What I wanted to explain a little bit about what is a feasibility study. So to put what we're doing now into a context, the MDCAM on the left side of the screen, that's Mass Department of Capital Asset Management. They set these rules for public sector bidding and design of projects. The first step is a feasibility study. The feasibility study is intended to answer what, where, how much is it going to cost? When am I going to do that? It includes the things that you've seen in previous meetings, space needs, site analyses, conceptual design, but they're very conceptual designs. The idea with the feasibility study is that it's enough information to identify the cost that you can take a project to town meeting and the funds for that can be appropriated to then go into the next phases of the project. That would typically start with schematic design. So the layout of a design that you see here is a concept design. When the project is appropriated through a successful town meeting vote, you may have another architect, you may have same architects, but they'll work on a new development. So you don't have to really think that this plan is baked in stone, so to speak. When you take it to town meeting, the successful town meeting vote requires 2/3 majority. And then if funds need to be borrowed, you have to go to a ballot vote on authorizing the expenditure and the borrowing of money that might impact your tax levy. So the feasibility study gets us to that stage. And then, as I mentioned, the next stage is you develop those designs. Your project is going to be over $10 million. So that sets off another sort of set of guardrails on the project. The project has to be pre-qualified for general contractors, so you don't get just anybody bidding on this job, but you get people bidding on the job that have been qualified by DCAM, the state, to do this type of a project. And the subcontractors would be similarly qualified. So you don't have to worry about the quality of the construction companies. And then once you get through design, which typically would take conservatively, another year to design it and bid it, the construction usually takes somewhere around 14 to 18 months time, depending on the size of the building. You're going to see when we get to the costs that they're a little bit different and a little bit higher than they were when we were here about 6 weeks ago. The problem is that the cost of steel and wood is increased. Those products come from Canada, and while the cost estimator was doing the estimate, those products received a 10% surcharge due to a tariff. So that's been reflected in the cost estimate. The heating and cooling equipment inevitably arrives from China, and you saw what was going on with China recently and tariffs and the cost. So everybody knows what's happening. It's hard to predict where it goes in the future. So the cost estimator has put a good number on it, but we've added another contingency into the budget to handle that uncertainty. Because what happens is it's happened in Newton just a month ago. You bid your project, the contractor that's successful starts working on the project. He gets the steel approved from the architect and the structural engineer. It's ready to order, and all of a sudden it gets hit by a tariff. He didn't know that when he bid it on the job. So the town has to cover that extra cost. So to be careful and to be conservative here, the cost estimators have put in a contingency in the cost estimate to handle things like that that will happen after the project goes to bid and make sure that the town has the funds to do the project. Now, if things change, when you get to that post-town meeting vote, if that's 2 years from now, or if it's 4 years from now, the tariff issue may be gone. The contract requires 3 more cost estimates to reset the cost as the project gets developed. So as much as we are concerned about the chaos in construction pricing, rest assured there's 3 more steps to go to get it to the right number, and this thing will settle out. But what we don't want to do is underestimate it now, because when you take it to town meeting, you really want to have funds appropriated. The cost estimates also were based on spring of 2026. And we did that so we know that your town meeting is always going to be in the spring. And so it gave it an easy opportunity for the town. If it takes 2 more years to get the project approved, well, it was set for 2026, so now I have to escalate it to 2028. So we put in a benchmark that's very clear in the cost estimate, and we did it set on your town meeting vote. So that also just made a slight adjustment in the cost because we were previously doing it based on a 2025 estimate, but this seems to be a good way of doing it. Those are long-winded way of saying we've given you a cost estimate. They're a little bit different than they were before. It's a fluid process. What we've also done is we've worked backwards on the cost. Let me minimize this. There. We've discussed with the town manager, and we discussed at these previous meetings that $20 million as a project cost seems to be a good working number today. It could go up, it could go down, but it's nice to have a threshold and a point to start at. When you work backwards from that number and you take out furniture, audio-visual equipment, each room has a full audio-visual capability in the new building. We take out design and owner's project management costs. You take out all the costs that are related to the project, it gets you to the construction cost. So in other words, you have about $14 to $14.6 million to build the building with, and then other costs are the audio-visual, the furniture. But what we don't want to do is go to town meeting and not have the full project in that appropriation. So the full project and the contingency gets you to the 20 million. And so what we've done is we've tried to work the program out with you all, with the COA, and with our team to come up with the size of a building that works within that budget and see if this all works as the feasibility study. And with that, let me pass it on to Nancy to talk about what that program is and then walk through the site analysis. Thank you.
So the program that you see before you here was developed through a number of stages. We started with the program that was given by the 5-year study planning committee. And then we had multiple meetings with the staff and with the COA and with the public. And through the process, we have narrowed it down to this number. So this program includes entry, administration, multi-purpose room, kitchen, program rooms, and all the support, and it totals 11,650 square feet. And this is the target area that we feel we can build for the budget that we're looking at. And taking this to the Tisbury Road site, you actually have the exact same area. There are some variations depending on the site on what you're actually going to find as your total project area. So going back to the site studies, I'm going to show you, we had 5 sites in total, and then we narrowed it down to 3. So the 5 sites included the water department and also 167, 169 Upper Main Street. And for those of you that have followed us from the beginning, you know that those have been eliminated from the study. So and then we added the 10 Daggett Street to include in more depth from just being a needs assessment to exactly why it doesn't still work. So, and then we have 333 West Tisbury Road and 44 Robinson, which many of you had seen before. We looked at the zoning. The 2 sites are in R20 and 1 in R5. And we compiled data for all 3 of these sites, the Robinson Road, Edgartown West Tisbury Road, and the 10 Daggett Street. And I'm not going to go through all of these, but it does include a lot of information required by the zoning, the dimensional data, parking, emergency vehicle, adjacency, so forth and so on. So this chart will be included in your report. So since the last meeting, we've done a deep dive into the anchors to really try to examine what are the difficulties, what are the challenges, and what are the opportunities, if there are any. Here's a map. As you can see, here's the anchors, very close to the water. This is Daggett Street. So trying to break this down into the site issues and the building issues, because they the building issues, the current residential structure doesn't meet the standards for commercial building. The floor loading is not adequate for commercial. So ideally you would beef that up if you were going to stay there and do an addition. And any construction or additions, renovations would create havoc in the area for all of the queuing for the Chappaquiddick Ferry. So that would be a major difficulty. Here's the property record card. You can see that we only have 0.2 acres. The building is sort of right on the property line on the southeast side. And it labels the total living area as 4,022. I think that includes the basement and the attic. One significant issue that is a difficulty with the site is the flooding. So this site falls within the FEMA VE zone, and that is the 100-year flood zone. So it means you have a 1% chance every year for it to flood. And the VE zone puts anything built in there vulnerable to damage from high velocity wave action and winds during a storm event. So the structure could be seriously damaged. So any future construction is limited to be built above the design flood elevation, which has to be above the base flood elevation. The base flood elevation here is 12 feet. your site, if you can see from, this is the contour map, you may not be able to see, but the elevation here is 5. So, and then your existing main floor is probably about 2.5 feet above that. So you're approximately 8 feet. So you're substantially below the base flood elevation. So any additional construction would have to be even higher than that. And this is a description of the code requirements for construction in a flood zone. So the base flood elevation, BFE, is the 12 feet. You have to add 3 feet for any additional construction. And then if you do an addition that is considered substantial improvement, the code requires you to bring the entire structure up to the floodplain standards. And improvement is considered substantial when it's more, the cost is more than 50% of the market value of the existing property. This is a significant shortcoming. Another shortcoming that all of you know is the traffic queuing for the ferry. This is a beautiful street. It's a beautiful front yard, beautiful facade. And you'd like to be able to drive down the street and enter the building, and it feels very important and lovely. But unfortunately, you've got traffic that queues up for the ferry, so no longer can people come in this way. You have this nice, the old Sculpin Gallery down at the end, which is a really nice adjacent neighbor, adds to the appeal of the site. Parking and access are two major issues that all of you are very well aware of. You only have 9 parking spaces in the front, and let's see, right here, in this part, the front portion, and in the back portion, you have 2. And these don't belong to the town. These are used conditionally while the Anchors is open, but they belong to the Faraway Hotel. Any traffic entering the site has to come through here. You've got to drive through this narrow driveway and then try to get your car turned around and fit into one of these spaces here. Pedestrians also have to come here if they want to get to this door. There's a ramp that they can come through the back and go, and there's an entry door here. So this is certainly not ideal. And this is an example of how the parking lot can get pretty full, but you still don't have enough. Even at 11 cars for staff and patrons is nowhere near enough. And there doesn't seem to be any alternative for parking or access, given the conditions with the ferry and with these parking lot configurations and where the building is. So the main parking lot used to be accessed through here, but now there's trees, so you can't come in this way. And there's signs that designate the parking spots here. But because there's no place to stripe, because it's gravel, people don't always park in an efficient fashion. So you're limiting the number of spots, the number of cars that can actually fit there. And then these are the 2 that are in the back. And again, the maneuvering difficulties trying to get in here, that's intimidating to the patrons. So I think it keeps people away. And as Lindsay said, I guess there have been some fender benders in the area. So that's definitely a problem. Access into the building. So you have from the back, you've got this long ramp that leads to this door at the main function room. You also have this ramp that you access through the same path that the cars do to get to this point, to get around to the front. And then you have this bulkhead here that sort of separates the 2, so you can't really have a continuous thing. And this is the door where most people enter from the parking lot. The other issue is this door here is at the top of this ramp. So if you want to come in this way and you come right into the function room, you're walking through a closet. And this ideally would be set up as a vestibule so that you could keep the cold air out, have the door come in, close the door, then open the other door, like most modern buildings have. But there's not enough space between the two doors for a wheelchair to operate that way. So this would not meet the handicap accessible code as it's built for that. The reception area is positioned between the two entrances, between the formal entrance and the entrance that I just showed you from the parking lot. As I mentioned, most of the people come through the parking lot. The only people that come through the formal entrance, I understand, are the people that are coming from the ferry. And the other thing that is a problem with the reception area is the receptionist is busy doing other tasks sometimes, and she's not able to greet people immediately, and there's no place for people to wait because it's just a narrow hallway. Also, this reception area has to handle the exchange of all of the medical equipment that comes from the basement. And it would be better to have a more private area for people to do that transaction. The kitchen is 246 square feet existing. It's pretty well used, and it looks like they've made very good use of space available, but it still limits what the programs, what the COA is able to do. The adjacent area where there's a, as you can see, there's a serving counter here that opens up to the kitchen. You also have these coolers in space, and it's not the most efficient use of space. But here's the there's a lot of different things placed in this room, and in addition to storage of chairs, which is not ideal. The other issue is the food pantry. There's not really a good location for all the food pantry storage. It would be better to have it all in one space. It's currently located in multiple places, some in the cabinets at the reception desk and some in the coolers in the basement. Program rooms, there's only 2 program rooms in the building. And the smaller one, it's a lovely room. It's like a formal parlor in the old house. It's used, I understand, for a knitting group, coffees, staff meetings, and it also serves as overflow space for lunches from the other room. And it's nice, there's these French doors that open in so that you can have this nice flow of space between the 2 rooms. This is your main room, 490 square feet. It's used for pretty much all the programs other than the ones I just mentioned. And because there's only one room, it limits the scheduling and it requires the staff to set up and take down multiple times between events. Fitness classes are limited to So this is the existing site plan. Here's the building right here. The green lines are the setback lines, so that's where you could build if you wanted to build. We measured up the existing building, and this is what you have, the central reception area with the 2 entrances. This is that lounge parlor area, the main multi-purpose room. This is the entrance, the back, and the kitchen and the serving area. First floor, you have 1,939 square feet. Second floor, one of the difficulties is it's not accessible. There's no elevator, and there's only 1 stair for egress. But you have 4 really good size offices and a small bathroom, and all the offices do have some storage, some closets, which it's very nice. Third floor, stair goes up to, I think all that space right now is just used for storage. That's what it looks like. And intern office, okay. So the total amount of space that you're looking at right now that seems to be usable, not including the basement, it measures 3,882 square feet. And we're looking for 11,500, so. So what could you do to improve it? This is a site plan of a potential minimal study for some things. We looked at, all right, it's not accessible. Can you add an elevator and a second means of egress? So this study shows, we've shown that here, if you do add the elevator and second means of egress, you're taking up most of your current multi-purpose room. So this would be at a minimum, you would, if you did that, I'm not saying you're going to, you would want to replace that room. So be adding on this space, your total first floor would be 2,627. And then on the second floor, in order to get from the elevator to all of the rooms, and this would be a benefit for sure, because all of these offices would be handicapped accessible, and you'd have a second means of egress. But this one office would get reduced to allow for a corridor. Third floor, just access to the space. This could be reconfigured if it turned out you wanted to do that. There is a chimney right here, so you'd have two small openings. The other things to consider is the elevator and the stair going up to the third floor, whether or not it would be worth it, because it's going to be higher than the existing building by the time you get to the roof over the elevator. So just looking at that as a hypothetical, in addition to the plans that I just showed you, this estimate includes things like new windows, it includes a new roof, which we didn't realize you already have one, and bringing the building up to current stages or current standards with the HVAC and the insulation and the floor loading, increasing the structural support of the floors, which would also require new ceilings. So this total project cost, well, we're looking at construction costs of $6,460,000. When you add in all of those things that Joel mentioned, soft costs and et cetera, the total project cost is $9,556,000. So just a study, so you have the information. Second site is the, you all have, most of you have seen this before, but I'm just going to run through it. And so you can see for comparison, you have 23.4 acres. This is the wastewater treatment department, and it's at 330 on West Tisbury Road. These are some of the views from the site. This is looking west down the Edgartown Tisbury Road from the mixed use path. This is a really nice feature that pedestrians, bikers, so forth can get to the site from this method. Looking the other way down the same path. This is the driveway into the wastewater department. And here's a view of the site into the site, and it's a wooded site. And you can see this is the Morning Glory Farm in the background. We did look at the site elevation here. You have this nice area here, which is relatively flat, and it's 35 to 36 as opposed to 5 at the other site. This large site, we looked at the potential of locating a building here, and also one locating building here. So this is the one that seemed to work, that we thought was better for a number of reasons. So this is the one we're showing in the study. You can come in from the same drive into a drive, which would include a drop-off and then a parking lot and a pedestrian connection to the pedestrian path. And then you have this nice southern exposure for a lot of outdoor activities and a green space. This is the Morning Glory Farm here. The green is the building setback line, the black line is the property line. Zooming in closer to the site plan, as you can see, we're keeping the building fairly close to the road to give a nice presence of the front part of the building to people driving by and also for the pedestrians, and it creates a more inviting impression than if you put a large parking lot in the front. But you do have the drop off on the right side of the car, which works best for dropping people off. And then you can come and park here and you're still pretty close to the entrance. This is a covered drop-off area. The site also shows possibility of adding a bocce courts and pickleball courts and a pretty nice green space, patio, and a greenhouse. The floor plan is a nice, simple organization of an L shape. And the L shape is creates this sort of nice semi-sheltered area for a backyard. And it's organized in that the corner of the L is the administrative wing. This way they can keep an eye on the people coming and on the parking and also be accessible to all of the other facilities in the building. And from the entrance, it's a very clear shot to the main public areas, the lounge. The lounge is a nice place for people to wait outside of the multi-purpose room while they're waiting for programs. They also have a nice view of the backyard. There's a coffee bar, covered patio, and a greenhouse and access to this patio. So we see this as a really nice social area. And then the other wing is the main program rooms, the activity and game room, showing some card tables and a pool table, arts and crafts. And then the flex room is big enough for 20 people to have an exercise class. And then you have a little room outside for people to mingle and put away their belongings. Also close to the entrance is a shared conference room, pretty good sized conference room for staff meetings and for small programs. You've got a health office. It would be shared for health and professional. And then your support facilities are centrally located, your restrooms and storage. And then a common companion restroom with a shower. The kitchen serves both the multi-purpose room and the lounge with these windows. You have the kitchen allows freezer, cooler, pantry, and a receiving area that opens to the outside. Medical equipment opens to the outside, so people don't have to be lugging things back and forth through the reception area. Some of the images of these program rooms, the multi-purpose room, the full room can seat with a lecture 64 seats, and I'm sorry, that's a half and half, 64 seats and 40 seats as dining if you have a partition. And then if you have a large style, like a big lecture like this, you could get 140 seats. And then looking at the plan there, you have the dining setup that shows there. And the dining is, you can get 88 seats. So looking at these images, this is a potential multi-purpose room layout with tables and chairs for dining. And here's a lecture. And this building would be a single-story building, so you would have the potential to have some nice high ceilings, some nice lighting coming through, so you could give a really nice, comfortable feel to the space, kind of like what the room that we're in here. The other nice use of the multi-purpose room is, as you can see, this is a large fitness class, so you can fit, you know, a lot more people. So you got a lot of potential with the multi-purpose room. Here's an example of a commercial kitchen with a service window into the adjacent space. The flex program room, I showed you this talking about fitness, but it can also be used for a number of other things. So it has a cushioned floor, so it works well for dance and Zumba, things like that. And then here's a picture of of arts and crafts room. An arts and crafts room would usually have a sink and tables set up for a variety of arts and crafts. Here's an example of a greenhouse, and I know there was a lot of interest in a greenhouse, which we are showing on the plans. This is a diagram. It doesn't mean that this is what the building is going to look like. This was just a diagram to give the cost estimator an idea of what to include in his price. And again, keep in mind, as Joel said, this is a very preliminary, just to show what would be feasible. The total project cost worksheet for West Tisbury is 330 West Edgartown, West Tisbury Road. Going through the same process, construction, new construction, 15,532,000. Soft costs total 2,563,000, with a total project cost of 20,500,000. So we're pretty close here to your target budget. Again, Joel explained sort of the ups and downs of that. So the third site, Robinson Road, current site of the Girls and Boys Club. This is a property record card. It shows 1.3 acres, and this is the current footprint of the Boys and Girls Club. And you have this pretty nice enclosed backyard. The elevation here is between 17 and 22 feet, and the building sits at 19 to 20. Some of the existing conditions, you have a gym that is existing. We did look at the building, took a tour, and it seemed like the gym was worth saving, but the other part of the building didn't seem like it was going to work for the Council on Aging. So our recommendation would be to take that down and have a combination renovation of the gym and new construction. And this is an image of the existing outdoor space, which is a nice enclosed backyard, which could have a lot of different things happen there. One of the big advantages of this site is the park across the street. And as you know, also the proximity to the library and the schools are right over here. But this is a park that is in the planning stages of a renovation, which is going to provide all kinds of multi-sport, pickleball courts, playing fields. And it's a huge amenity to have across the street from the Council on Aging. We have superimposed our preliminary site plan on here, and you can see how it would relate to this existing park. The parking that we're showing, we're assuming and hoping that we can work with the town to allow some parking from this driveway that you would access these other playing fields, that you could also have parking on both sides to get to our ideal number of 50 parking spaces for the site. Zooming in closer to this site plan, our concept with this site plan is that this is the existing gym, and the perimeter of the site is very contained, as you saw in the backyard. We didn't want to make it, we want to be able to develop these outdoor spaces, these outdoor rooms adjacent to the building, that we could have these indoor-outdoor connections, rather than having just hug the setback line. So this is the setback line, but we have this space here, this space here, and this space here. So it's sort of this K configuration where that's accomplished. And going back to the parking, this is the double loaded back-to-back with an island so that we could soften the impact with some planting as well. Making a pedestrian connection so people coming from this area could just walk straight into the facility without having to cross over the parking lot at all. And then this curved drop-off gives you a space for people to drop people off and wait for people that they're picking up. And then we have the 50 parking spaces. And we're showing some van parking over here. In an earlier scheme, we looked at providing a cover for this corner, but we took it out because of budget reasons. But, you know, you could always add it in the future if you wanted to with this configuration. Here's the plan. This is the K-shaped form that I talked about. This is the existing gym. The new construction is intended to be held off separate from the existing gym and have this sort of free-flowing circulation zone rather than a corridor. So because it is a long distance, we don't want to have it be this long, narrow corridor, but this is a sort of a social zone that you can have a number of different places for people to interact. One at the reception area, some outside the conference room, and then you have some space for entrance into the main multi-purpose room. And then at the end, it opens into a larger lounge that then also opens to, oh, sorry, I was trying to point at the covered patio and the yard beyond. And then the greenhouse would be accessible from the lounge. And then you could also come out to this patio as well. You have a flex room, which would be accessible from the end of the circulation path, which could serve as arts and crafts as well as exercise. So we're showing a sink there. The kitchen is positioned here so that it can service the lounge and the multi-purpose room. And of course, the administrative area is in the front, so it can oversee the parking lot and all the people coming in, and the receptionist can serve the guests, answer questions and so forth, and then still interact with the rest of the administrative staff. And the gym, we would renovate the gym and bring it up to the current energy standards, new siding, new roof, and some cosmetics. We're showing an additional structure on the side to allow medical equipment storage to happen outside at the parking lot, and then a storage area for the gym, all the gym supplies. Bathrooms, again, are centrally located. We'd have the men's and women's, and then also a single person, a single use companion restroom. Health office is right inside the door, which could also be shared for professionals. So go back to this for a minute. From the initial program, we had all of these things: game room, arts and crafts room, flex room. This plan, to get to the budget, we are looking at the area of 14,500 square feet, of which 8,750 is new construction and 5,800 is the renovated gym. So because of the gym, you have a lot of expenditure going to that renovation. It's an asset because, as Joel explained at the last meeting, a lot of senior centers are putting gyms in their programs now. It's very popular, and fitness is becoming one of the biggest, most highly demanded programs. So it makes sense to make good use of the gym. It's a very large space, but because of that, we don't have room to include a separate game room, a separate billiard room, a separate arts and crafts room. So a lot of different things can happen in the gym and in the flex room, but we did look at another option, which had a whole second floor, which put all those other functions in it, but it was not going to meet the budget, so we didn't want to show it to you. But just to look at other places that have used common areas for a number of different functions, here's one that for games, and then here doing cards in the flex room, using the lounge for a number of different things. That's a large open space that could be flexible. And then this is a picture of billiards. So difficulty with billiards is it wasn't ranked highly in the survey, and billiards kind of needs a dedicated space, so you really have to think hard about whether or not you want to put that in. It's a very good way to attract men, as you all know, that people, you know, I mean, a lot of women like to play billiards as well, but so it's just some of the things to think about and the pros and cons of the options. This is a massing diagram for the Robinson Road. So we're looking at a sort of a high space for the multi-purpose room and the program room, the flex room, and then this lower entrance area for the offices, and then there's the gym, so that we want to articulate the separation between the two. The total project cost worksheet for Robinson Road. The total construction cost is $16,171,728. Total soft costs is $2,674,259, with a total project cost of $21,326,586. This is a little higher than Tisbury, but you do get your total area is higher. So you're not always comparing exactly the same thing, you know, back and forth. Every site has its advantages and disadvantages. So I'm going to let Joel talk about the cost estimates.
Thank you. This just puts the three projects on one page. I round the anchors at 10 million, West Tisbury 20, and Robinson Road is 21. Again, this is conceptual design, so as you go to the next phase, if the budget ends up being 18, there's a lot of opportunities. If the budget can be 20, it can have other opportunities. This is sort of where the project is at today at the feasibility study phase. And in the report, there will be sort of a pro-con analysis. The reason I put this up here is it's not really our job to pick the site for the community. So, I mean, we'd love to say in the report that there is a preferred site that helps to, but how you get to, as a community saying this is the preferred site, we haven't done that yet. We've heard a lot at these meetings that there's a preferred site, but how wide and broad that goes. One way we've worked on this, we've done this in Reading and a couple other communities that have built projects like this recently. They form committees of 10 to 15 people that are representative of the Permanent Building Committee, Board of Selectmen, or the Select Board, other groups, and you create a custom evaluation chart that works for the community. This is the beginning of that for this project. And you can go through and rank the three sites and have a very data-driven selection of a site based on a set of common criteria, so that you're not just saying, well, I like that site because it's closest to my house, or it's some other arbitrary decision. These are decisions that are important to the town. You agree on what the factors are, and then you rank the sites according to that. So it makes it more objective. We may not need to go to that process. That's something that we'd love to hear today. But this just shows you the timeline. So depending on when the town takes this to town meeting, we've said there's approximately a 12-month process of design, community input, community outreach, bidding, and then construction. So it's about a 24 to 26-month process, maybe up to 28, depending on the construction, once you get the project approved at town meeting. So 2 years. Thank you. Any questions? And
What timeframe again for the final completion, when the building will actually be in use? Are we looking at 2028 or later?
well, it's from the time the project is voted on and you can move in and operate and occupy it. We're saying it's 26 months. It could be 24, it could be 28. We're using 26. So 2 years, 2 months. That's fully furnished, everything operated, the building's commissioned, you move in and it's ready to go. Now, we don't know when the town meeting vote would be, but that's why there's no dates on here. It's just a timeline.
So the question on the Robinson Road. There's no Boys and Girls Club. The gym would be gym would be only for use for basketball.
The question is on 44 Robinson Road. I'm just doing this for the online folks. What's the use of the gym? The gym could be converted to be used, pickleball, could be fitness programs, it could be basketball, it could be in Andover, they use it as a walking area. They create a walking activity. You can use anything you want. It can be drama programs.
I would just say that sky's the limit. I mean, I feel like basketball is probably one of the least popular sports of our participants, so probably not basketball for us, maybe. People are, but you know, other centers have had a lot of luck with like chair volleyball and badminton, and I mean, I think, again, it just opens up a lot of possibilities, and I think the walking possibility is one I hear a lot of feedback, a lot of heads are nodding. Just having a place you can walk in the colder, darker months.
Since we just was 5,000 square feet.
Yeah, I mean, so I think, again, I think there are a lot of opportunities with that, and we certainly are open to that, and that would be a plus of having a gym. I don't think we kind of entered this thinking that was at the top of our list, but it does open up a lot of possibilities.
Multiple use of that.
Yeah,
I will say that Pembroke, Sandwich, Sudbury, Newton, Reading, all of our current and recent projects have the gym, and it's a different, younger demographic driving that piece, that they want that activity. And in all of those, the gyms open at night. If it's 7 o'clock, if it's not used by the seniors, there maybe can be another program go in there and use the gym to expand it. Or you could even have town meetings in there. It could be as sky's the limit.
yeah.
And could it also be designed for flex as well? So that it could be partitioned easily, and then when it's not being used as a great big space.
Yes,
Okay.
it would be.
and it
In
wouldn't
their
be-
scheme, she has a,
constant to make it also flexible.
well, when we do that, we make them flexible, but we don't put soundproof barrier between A and B. It gets to be prohibitively expensive. You can do that in the multipurpose room relatively easy, but the gym,
Don't have a reading book club in one side,
Yeah.
basketball in the other. Thank you.
I can see where there are gonna be lockers. Are you gonna have lockers in the facilities?
they're usually cubbies. We don't typically put in a locker room or a changing facility. Those are the kind of things that if the community wants, and we need to hear that, but in all of the examples we've given, they don't have that. People come ready to exercise, and Nancy pointed out there is that single user restroom that has a shower. So if somebody does come from work and wants to exercise and then go back to work, and then, the seniors still working, they can do that. They can take a shower, but there's no full locker room.
Because I come from a city and we can lock things up, our purses. If you have off-duty officers, they have handcuffs
Yeah.
and stuff that they locked.
Within the side of the gym, there are individual lockers for wallets, keys, coats, all that stuff. What I meant, there's no locker room, but there are lockers for your belongings.
Yeah, those things can always be, those are sort of fun elements that will definitely be dealt with in the next phase of the project, so. Don't worry.
Anybody else have questions or comments?
It's just about on all three, on the two locations. As far as for staff use, there seemed to be offices, and it seemed to be enough offices. There didn't seem to be a lot of staff. Use stuff, like for instance, a staff room, bathrooms for staff. They all seem to be located at one end of the building as opposed to in the middle, so you're walking on the Robinson Road from a staff person going to the other end, that's a good sized walk if there's an emergency. And everyone seems, so I was just wondering if that could be addressed.
It's,
Staff use.
that kind of thing could be addressed in the next phase of design if somebody wanted to add an office in the back. I mean, that's really an issue for administrative. When we do two-story buildings, we actually have to separate the staff because you want someone on each floor, but typically on a one-story building, we don't spread them out, but those are the kinds of things that you can develop, you know.
And I think it's important to remember too, this is just conceptual now, so as Joel's saying and Nancy has mentioned, like, these are the fine tuning details that would get figured out as we get into the next phase. Any other, oh, I'm sorry, yeah.
Okay, so Lindsay and James, I'm trying to wrap my head around this. Are we thinking that we're going to be having all the decisions made for a town meeting 2026? Or are we looking at 2027?
I would love to get an answer, but I think James is probably more accurate.
No, thank you, Lindsay. Next, so we're in FY 26, so just so the confusion in terms of the dates, we're calendar year 2025, obviously, but we're in fiscal year 2026. Fiscal year 2027 will start July 1st, 2026. So we'll have town meeting April 2026 for the FY 27 budget. That budget's gonna encompass probably $70 to $80 million for a new high school. You're gonna see the newspaper article that was, I think is that, as well as the Times, that it's gonna be an island-wide vote. And that island-wide vote occurs somewhere around town meeting, maybe before, maybe after, but I'd be very hesitant to put a $20 million council on aging with a $80 million high school on the same warrant for a variety of obvious reasons. Likewise, there's potential this December to have a special town meeting to ask for $2 to $3 more million for some funding shortfalls and the bids coming back from the fire station. That's gonna get sorted out in the next 2 weeks. So, long answer to your short question, it would be the following year at the earliest, but there's also the variable, the Boys and Girls Club property, when they're gonna be done there. And then we borrow money, and we don't know the Boys and Girls Club, we're hitting that kind of 5 to 6% annual inflation. And it could be a spot we need to come back, and there's the other way to do it, which Joel mentioned, where we appropriate a certain amount of money to maybe $3 million, you hire an owner's project manager, an architect, and then you get the schematic design, then you put the bids out, and it's timed well enough that you go to town meeting with the bids in hand, you know how much you're gonna need. But again, the big variable here is the Boys and Girls Club, so not this year, but next year, there will have to be some financial traction, whether it be that SD, OPM, architects, or going for the whole appropriation. Did that answer your question, Mr. Rob?
James, this has come up a couple of times, like, do you feel like there's any possibility that the town, if they look at the Robinson Road property as the preferred property, would the town be willing to step forward as a first step to purchase that property as kind of a holding, you know, then we have a land, and then based on the timing of the Boys and Girls Club's exit, that would of course, you know, affect whether or not we could start the process.
I think regardless if a future council on aging was to go at that location and that property went on the market, it would be a smart decision for the town to purchase it, just based on where the location is, contiguous to all other town properties. It can be used for staff housing, it can be used for municipal housing, it can be used for affordable housing, and it's a gym, and a lot of those different factors. So I'm not the decision maker, and that's obviously town meeting. There's obviously what the appraised value is and what the actual cost would be, but I think that location right close to town, the town would be unwise to forego that purchase.
I'm just wondering if that could go ahead and be done
independently of when it comes on the market, get some appraisals on the building and make them an offer based on, you know, the town wanting it for some purpose or another, rather than wait for appreciation.
I'm all for an offer they can't refuse, but I would argue that their business interest is we're gonna wait till we get to a more final area, right? More final area with the Boys and Girls Club renovation. The property is gonna appreciate, and we're at that timeline, we need to move people out, move to no building. So I know that building sale is going to supplement some of the funding there within their financial plan. So it's within their best interest to wait, to sell. Likewise, we could get an appraisal now. I know I was actually speaking to an appraiser this morning for another property. That's a whole different set of parameters for a whole different type of agreement. But we could do it now, and the appraisal will only last a certain amount. And then there's the back and forth, right, first refusal, and a lot of different interests. But I agree, once we see some more substantive process across the street, because this has been a 4 or 5 year endeavor by the Boys and Girls Club. So I'm not gonna say that they're not gonna move forward, but until I start seeing foundations going in and steel beams, I'm very hesitant to get too far out of the skis with purchasing that property. Because at the end of the day, town does have a right of first refusal, so we have that on our side.
With the larger facility, do you envision this to be open and making budget preparation from 6 in the morning to 10 at night?
Well, again, I think, let me get over here just so I can face everybody. That's a bigger issue that is obviously we would need to have a much bigger staff to be able to meet those hours. And as you know, on the island right now, it's very funding for those extended hours is something, you know, if that's what the community was looking for and the town would agree to that, and I can't speak for that. That could be pursued, but I would think we're not at a point where that would be something. I frankly am concerned about staffing the building from 9 to 4 because staffing is a constant challenge. And so to expand it from 6 AM to 10 PM is kind of a broader swath of hours than I've been envisioning, but I feel like at this point, everything's conceptual, so if there is a will from the townspeople to increase the budget, if there's staffing that we can fund, those staff can find housing, you know, there's just a lot of different layers to that.
Yeah, because if you have that big gym there, you could hustle it up and, you know, have rentals or do something else or give it, you know, work a budget thing with other groups who wanna use it to help fund the.
So sure, and the Boys and Girls Club, I learned they had been leasing that out to a pickleball group that was using the gym space, and now some preschools are using the gym space as well, so again, I think you know, I hope that in this room and in our staff, we have a lot of people who are forward thinking and trying to come up with being, you know, as innovative as we can, so we would want to get the most out of the space that we can. Whether or not we can do that with paid Edgartown employees is another issue. But I think there are many different ways that we can look at to try to use the space to its capacity. And I think we're all very committed to the idea of this being a community space. I think that's something that we could really, that would only enhance the town and what it can offer is to have more spaces available to community members, whether it be sporting, meetings, gatherings, you know, knitting groups or whatever it might be. I think just having more options and opportunities for the community to use the space would be a welcome addition to the town.
I was just gonna comment that historically, this age group, and I actually put myself into this, don't like to drive at nighttime, so nighttime programming has never been something that's on our radar anyways. You know, not to leave anyone out, but until you have cataract surgery, you tend to see some tracers when you're driving at night, and people don't like to do it, and so.
But I would argument that there are people from 55 to 75 that would probably come if there were night and weekend hours. And the reason that we have such an older population here is because we don't make anything available for those people.
Again, I feel like, we're really driven day to day in the COA operations by what people want and what they tell us they're looking for. So anything is possible and we're happy to try to find that way to make it work. If people say we really want a nighttime, whatever that might be, it just may not be through paid Edgartown staff. It might be someone from our friends organization runs it, or there's a community member who runs that gym program at night. Like, I think anything is possible, and we are always driven by participants' interest in what they're.
And volunteers help me go around.
And I'm not a morning person, so I don't come to the anchors for exercise. But I would love to go either in the afternoon or in the evening. So, you might even have your exercise teachers. Classes. Not even one person.
That's, Diana, is that gonna count on?
So I'm looking for clarity again, and I'm looking for what is our next step now that this meeting is over? Or no, it's still going on, but what is our next step to form these groups? At any rate, should we take an informal vote here and say, this is what we'd like, but most particularly, next steps from this meeting on?
James, do you wanna?
Yeah, it's a good question. And Joel, correct me if I'm wrong, this is scheduled for the select board agenda on the 17th. 4 o'clock, 70 Main Street. Discuss it as one of the sole agenda items. Beginning this presentation. And then the feasibility study will formally be selected, formally approved, hopefully by the select board. And then we start looking at the following fiscal year. The processes for town meeting start in September. Start September 2025. For items that are going to be actioned in April of 2026. So it's a pretty lengthy, in-depth process. So I think Boys and Girls Club, select board approval, communication with the Boys and Girls Club, follow up with Joel down the road if any numbers he thinks changed, and then go for the following year, whether it be purchase of the Boys and Girls Club property or concurrent procurement of an owner's project manager and an architect. But again, there's a lot of factors involved. If for some reason this school doesn't pass, that changes the tax situation. If the school ends up not being 60, 70 million, it ends up being 100 million, just sold from the town of Edgartown, that changes dynamics. There's a lot of moving pieces on the biggest capital project ever in the history of the island right on the horizon. There's going to be a lot of decisions that voters need to make at town meetings about what their priorities are. I think this has been discussed for a while. It's a good location. Timing is of essence, but it's, as Joel mentioned, it's a very in-depth process. Lastly, I'd like to thank Joel, his team, obviously Lindsay, Lisa, Marlene, and we had a lot of people who spent a lot of time and effort in putting this together. I don't want anyone to think it was just Joel a couple hours by his computer, because this is multiple meetings, multiple site visits, multiple surveys, and to get to this point, it's a significant milestone. And I think it was well done. I think your team, Joel, did a good job explaining the process, those first couple slides. So what is the feasibility study, why it's necessary, and what's the chapter 149 public construction puzzle that is somewhat difficult, even for me to interpret, and I do it every day. So again, thank you.
Thank you.
Are there any questions from people online?
Yeah, I asked that and, would anybody on Zoom like to ask a question?
Unmute yourself.
Say heard me. They don't.
Great. Thank you.
And Joel and Nancy will stick around